You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this and you will find strength. What if I told you that most of what you're chasing right now, respect, influence, peace, even attraction, comes faster when you stop forcing it? The harder you push, the more it slips away, and the moment you learn to do nothing, truly nothing, the world begins to move toward you instead. You've been taught that effort equals value, that constant motion is strength, that silence means weakness. But the Stoics knew something most people still don't. Stillness is not laziness. Restraint is not passivity. And doing nothing at the right moment is often the most powerful move you can make. Think about how exhausting it feels to always explain yourself, chase validation, react to every provocation, and prove your worth. Now imagine the opposite. Imagine being so grounded, so centered that outcomes start aligning without you chasing them. Conversations shift. Power dynamics change. People lean in, not because you tried harder, but because you stopped trying altogether. In this video, you'll learn why doing nothing is an art, how restraint creates leverage, and why the person in the room quietly controls the outcome. Watch this till the very end, not for motivation, but for mastery. Because once you understand this principle, you'll never waste energy the same way again. Number 1. Mastering restraint instead of compulsive action. Mastering restraint instead of compulsive action begins with a truth most people resist. Doing nothing is often the most disciplined move you can make. Not lazy nothing, not avoidant nothing, but intentional stillness. The Stoics understood this deeply, reminded himself, it is not that we have a short time to live, but that we waste much of it. What he was pointing to wasn't productivity, it was restraint. The ability to not rush, not grasp, not react. You feel the pressure to act constantly because the world rewards motion, noise, and visible effort. But inner power grows in the opposite direction. It grows when you stop flinching at every impulse. Most of your unnecessary stress comes from compulsive action. The urge to respond immediately, to fix, to clarify, to chase certainty. You feel uneasy when things are unresolved, so you move too fast, you speak too soon, you choose too early, and in doing so, you give away leverage you didn't even realize you had. Restraint is the skill of holding that leverage, of letting the moment breathe, of allowing space to do the work your force never could. When you don't rush, situations reorganize themselves around your patience. You stop interfering with outcomes that would have naturally favored you. Epictetus said it cleanly. First say to yourself what you would be, and then do what you have to do. That order matters. Identity first, action second. Compulsive action skips the first step. It acts to relieve discomfort, not to honor principle. Restraint asks you to sit with the discomfort instead of trying to escape it. That's where strength is built. Every time you resist the urge to immediately act, you train your nervous system to tolerate uncertainty. And uncertainty is where most people lose control. You don't need more tactics, you need more pause. The pause is where clarity enters. When you slow down, you begin to see how often action is driven by fear of being misunderstood, overlooked, left behind, or judged. Restraint cuts through that. It says, I don't need to prove anything right now. And paradoxically, that's when things begin to come to you instead of you chasing them. Less effort, more alignment. Seneca warned, we suffer more often in imagination than in reality. Compulsive action is usually an attempt to outrun imagined outcomes. You act to prevent something that hasn't even happened yet. Restraint brings you back to the present. It asks one question: what actually requires action right now? Most of the time, the honest answer is nothing. And that realization is uncomfortable because it removes the illusion of control, but it also removes wasted effort. Here's the habit you must begin practicing: delayed response. Not as a tactic, but as a discipline. When the impulse to act arises, don't suppress it. Observe it. Let it sit. Count a few slow breaths. Ask yourself whether acting now improves the situation or merely soothes your nerves. Over time, you'll notice something subtle but powerful. The urge weakens when you don't obey it immediately. You reclaim choice, and choice is freedom. Another practice is intentional inaction. Set moments where you consciously choose not to intervene, not to correct, not to initiate. This rewires your relationship with control. You start seeing how often outcomes improve when you stop interfering. This isn't passivity, it's precision. You are conserving energy for moments that truly matter, like a skilled archer who doesn't release every arrow just because they can. Restraint also sharpens perception. When you're not constantly acting, you're watching, listening, noticing patterns. The Stoics prize this quiet awareness because it reveals truth faster than force ever will. You begin to sense timing. You feel when something is ready and when it's not. And when you finally do act, it lands with weight because it's rare, measured, and deliberate. This is where the art of doing nothing becomes misunderstood. From the outside, it looks like inactivity. Internally, it's intense discipline. You are resisting impulses that once controlled you. You are choosing long-term advantage over short-term relief. You are building the capacity to stay centered while others burn energy reacting to shadows. Adopt this mindset. Not every urge deserves movement. Let that sentence guide you. Write it down, repeat it, live it. When you stop moving compulsively, you stop scattering your power. You become harder to manipulate, harder to rush, harder to destabilize. You gain a quiet authority, not because you dominate situations, but because you are no longer dominated by your own impulses. Wrote, be tolerant with others and strict with yourself. This is what he meant. Be strict about your reactions, your timing, your need to interfere. The world doesn't need more frantic motion. It responds to grounded presence. Start today. Delay one reaction. Sit with one urge. Do nothing on purpose. And watch how much begins to work in your favor when you finally stop forcing it. Number 2, letting silence create psychological gravity. Letting silence create psychological gravity begins with a counterintuitive Stoic insight. The less you reach outward, the more the world leans in. Wrote, let your strength be seen, not heard. Read that again and let it settle. Silence is not emptiness, it is density. When you stop filling every gap with explanation, defense, or noise, something heavier takes its place. Presence, attention, gravity. You feel it when you don't rush to respond, when you don't rush to define yourself, when you don't rush to conclude what anything means. You become a still point, and still points bend the field around them. Most people fear silence because it exposes impatience. It exposes the itch to be seen, to be validated, to be certain. The Stoic trains in the opposite direction. You learn to stand comfortably inside the pause. You learn to let the moment breathe without interrupting it. And as you do, you'll notice something subtle but powerful. Silence invites projection. When you do not explain yourself, others fill the space. When you do not react, others interpret. When you do not chase clarity, clarity begins to chase you. This is psychological gravity at work, not manipulation, alignment. Epictetus said, "We have 2 ears and 1 mouth so that we can listen twice as much as we speak." That isn't advice about politeness. It's a strategy for power. Listening without scrambling to respond builds weight. It signals self-sufficiency. It says you are not starving for resolution. You are not threatened by ambiguity. You can remain open without collapsing into action. That composure turns silence into an anchor, and anchors pull things toward them without effort. Here, what you must practice if you want this to become natural, resisting the reflex to fill space. Every day, notice how often your mind wants to jump in, to comment, to label, to conclude. Then don't. Let the moment pass unadorned. Let the thought drift without catching it. This is not passivity, it is restraint. And restraint is strength with a long fuse. Over time, your inner world becomes quieter but also more concentrated, less static, more signal. When you speak after that, your words land heavier because they arrive from silence, not from noise. Seneca warned, "Nature has given us one tongue and two ears, so we may hear from others twice as much as we speak." Silence sharpens perception. It gives you room to observe without distortion. You begin to feel the rhythm of situations instead of forcing your own tempo onto them. You notice when to wait and when to move. And paradoxically, the less you push, the more doors seem to open, because you're no longer broadcasting need. You're broadcasting steadiness. Psychological gravity also comes from unanswered energy. When you don't immediately resolve tension, it doesn't disappear, it deepens. And depth attracts. This doesn't mean withholding for effect. It means honoring timing, letting silence mature the moment, letting things come to you in their own shape instead of dragging them into yours. The Stoics knew that impatience is a form of weakness because it reveals dependence on outcomes. Silence cures that dependency. It teaches you that you can remain whole without immediate closure. Practice this daily exercise, intentional pauses. Before responding, internally or externally, take 3 slow breaths, not to calm yourself but to create space. Feel the urge to speak rise and fall. Let it pass. Then decide if anything truly needs to be said. Often you'll find that silence does the work better. Another exercise, written restraint. Write a paragraph expressing everything you want to say, then delete it. Sit with the feeling that follows. This trains your nervous system to realize that expression is optional, not mandatory. Silence also strengthens your internal authority. When you stop narrating yourself, you stop outsourcing your sense of self. You no longer need to announce who you are or what you stand for. You embody it quietly. And embodiment always outweighs explanation. The Stoics believed that virtue radiates without promotion. That truth requires no megaphone. When you live this way, you feel lighter and heavier at the same time. Lighter because you're not carrying the burden of constant output. Heavier because your presence has mass. Remember this as you move forward. Silence is not absence. It is contained intention. It is choosing not to spend your energy where it won't compound. It is trusting that what belongs to you will move toward you when you stop chasing it. Begin today. Speak less. Pause longer. Let silence gather force around you. You'll find that doing nothing, done correctly, starts giving you everything. Number 3, detaching from outcomes to increase leverage. Detaching from outcomes to increase leverage sounds counterintuitive at first because you've been trained, quietly, relentlessly, to believe that wanting something badly is proof of seriousness. But the Stoics saw through that illusion early. They understood that neediness weakens position while inner independence sharpens it. Epictetus put it plainly, "If you want to be invincible, make no treaty with anything that depends on another's will." Read that again. The moment your peace hinges on a result, a reaction, or an outcome, you surrender leverage. Not to the situation, but to your own expectations. Detachment doesn't mean apathy, it means clarity. It's you deciding that your worth, your steadiness, and your direction are not hostage to how things unfold. When you loosen your grip on outcomes, something unexpected happens. Your mind relaxes, your body slows, your presence deepens. And from that calm center, you begin to see options that were invisible before. Pressure narrows perception. Detachment widens it. This is why doing nothing is often the most strategic move. You stop thrashing, and the waters settle enough for you to see. Most people leak leverage through emotional investment. They telegraph urgency. They rush to secure certainty. They push for closure. The Stoic does the opposite. You stay rooted. You allow space. You refuse to chase the future with anxious hands. Seneca warned, "He suffers more than necessary who suffers before it is necessary." Attachment makes you suffer in advance. Detachment brings you back to the only place you can actually act well, the present moment, and presence is power. Here's the paradox you must internalize. The less you need an outcome, the more influence you have over the process. When you're not desperate for a specific ending, your responses become measured instead of frantic. You listen better, you speak less. You choose timing instead of reacting to impulse. This quiet restraint communicates confidence without announcing it. People feel it. Situations respond to it, not because you manipulated anything, but because calm certainty carries weight. Detachment also dissolves fear. Fear thrives on imagined futures. When you stop living 5 steps ahead, fear loses its fuel. Reminded himself, never let the future disturb you. You will meet it if you have to with the same weapons of reason which today arm you against the present. Detaching from outcomes is trusting that you will handle whatever arrives, not because you control it, but because you control yourself. That trust is leverage. It frees you from rushing. It frees you from overcommitting. It frees you from betraying your own standards just to secure a result. Now let's talk habit, because philosophy without practice stays ornamental. The first exercise is outcome fasting. For 1 week, notice every time your mind fixates on how something should turn out. Don't fight the thought, just label it attachment. Then gently return your attention to what you can do well right now, your effort, your conduct, your restraint. This trains your nervous system to decouple action from anxiety. Over time, you'll feel lighter, sharper, more deliberate. The second exercise is voluntary uncertainty. Once a day, resist the urge to resolve something prematurely in your mind. Don't seek mental closure. Let questions remain unanswered. Let ambiguity breathe. This is uncomfortable at first. Your mind craves certainty like sugar, but staying with uncertainty builds emotional strength. It teaches you that you don't need immediate resolution to remain steady. And that steadiness is what quietly tilts situations in your favor. Detachment also demands humility. You must accept that not everything bends to your will, and that this is not a flaw in the universe, it's a feature. The Stoics called this love of fate, not passive resignation but active acceptance. You give your best effort, then release the rest. You stop negotiating with reality, and when you stop arguing with what is, you conserve enormous energy. That energy becomes leverage, not outwardly aggressive but inwardly unshakable. Notice how different this feels from force. Force strains, detachment steadies. Force exhausts, detachment sustains. When you stop clinging, you stop broadcasting fear of loss. And fear of loss is what weakens posture, speech, and decision-making. When there's nothing you're desperately trying to protect, you move freely. You can walk away mentally even while staying engaged physically. That inner freedom is impossible to fake. Make this your final practice, daily negative visualization, but use gently. Spend a few minutes imagining outcomes not going your way, without drama, without spiraling. Just acknowledge, I would still be okay. I would still have myself. This isn't pessimism. It's emotional insurance. It reduces attachment by proving to your mind that your core remains intact regardless of external shifts. Once you know that, leverage returns to you naturally. Detachment is not withdrawal from life. It's full participation without desperation. You still act. You still care. You simply refuse to let outcomes dictate your inner climate. And when you master that, you discover the quiet art the Stoics lived by, doing less, grasping nothing, and somehow standing in the strongest position of all. Number 4, allowing patience to outlast pressure. Allowing patience to outlast pressure is one of the most counterintuitive disciplines you can build, because everything around you is trained to rush, react, and resolve immediately. Yet the Stoics knew something most people never learn. Time favors the composed. When you stop scrambling, when you stop tightening your grip, when you stop trying to force clarity before it's ready, pressure begins to weaken. Not because it disappears, but because it runs out of leverage. As reminded himself, You don't have to turn this into something. It doesn't have to upset you. That line is not passive. It's sovereign. It's the voice of someone who understands that urgency is often the enemy of wisdom. Pressure feeds on your movement. The more you rush to answer it, the more it multiplies. Patience starves it. When you do nothing deliberately and consciously, you interrupt the cycle. You give your mind room to breathe. You let situations reveal their true weight instead of the imagined one. This is where quiet power lives, not in controlling outcomes, but in refusing to be rushed into decisions that don't deserve your energy. You're not delaying out of fear. You're waiting out of confidence. You need to understand this deeply. Most pressure is artificial. It's emotional static. It's noise pretending to be urgency. And when you instantly respond to it, you reward it. You train yourself to believe that every internal tension requires immediate action. The Stoic path asks you to reverse that training, to pause, to observe the sensation of pressure without obeying it, to stay still long enough that the mind stops exaggerating consequences. That's when clarity appears, not as a dramatic insight but as a calm knowing. Seneca captured this perfectly when he said, "He who suffers before it is necessary suffers more than is necessary." Pressure often demands that you suffer in advance. It tells you to anticipate loss, rejection, failure, or chaos. Patience refuses that invitation. You stay present. You remain anchored. You allow time to do what force never can, separate what matters from what merely feels loud. Doing nothing in the Stoic sense is not laziness. It is restraint guided by intelligence. It is you deciding that not every moment requires your intervention. When you don't rush to act, you gain something rare, perspective. And perspective dissolves panic. When panic dissolves, choices improve. When choices improve, outcomes follow. This is how you get more by doing less, not magically but methodically. Here's a practice you need to adopt immediately: intentional delay. Choose one moment each day where you feel an urge to act, respond, or decide quickly, and don't. Sit with the discomfort. Notice how your mind tries to convince you that waiting is dangerous. Then watch how that intensity fades. This trains your nervous system to tolerate uncertainty. Over time, patience stops feeling like effort and starts feeling like strength. Another exercise, pressure labeling. When you feel internal pressure rise, don't argue with it. Name it. Quietly say to yourself, "This is pressure, not reality." This simple separation weakens its grip. You stop identifying with the sensation. You stop letting it narrate your actions. You regain space. And in that space, patience grows naturally. Epictetus taught, "First say to yourself what you would be, and then do what you have to do." If who you aim to be is calm, grounded, and unshakable, then patience is not optional, it's essential. You can't embody steadiness while rushing. You can't cultivate mastery while reacting. Patience is the bridge between intention and action. There's a deeper layer here you must internalize. Patience is not waiting for permission. It's waiting for alignment. When you act too soon, you often act from tension rather than truth. When you wait, you allow your response to come from a place of coherence. This is why patience often feels uncomfortable at first. It denies the ego its need to resolve anxiety quickly. But that discomfort is temporary. The stability it builds is lasting. You should also practice mental stillness drills. Set aside a few minutes each day to sit without input. No stimulation, no planning, no fixing. Just presence. When thoughts arise urging action, let them pass. This strengthens your ability to remain unmoved when pressure appears later. You're not suppressing thought, you're refusing to be dragged by it. Understand this. When you stop reacting, others adjust. Not because you manipulate them, but because your stillness changes the emotional temperature of the moment. Pressure depends on participation. When you don't participate, it collapses under its own weight. And suddenly, without pushing, without chasing, without forcing, you find that outcomes align in your favor. Patience is not about waiting endlessly. It's about waiting intelligently, knowing when not to move, knowing when silence does more than speech, knowing when restraint protects your energy better than action. This is the art of doing nothing and still getting everything that truly matters. Start now. Slow your internal clock. Let urgency pass without obeying it. Build patience until pressure no longer intimidates you. And watch how life begins to meet you where you stand, calm, grounded, and unmoved. Number 5. Refusing to chase validation or approval. Refusing to chase validation or approval is not about withdrawing from life or pretending you don't care. It's about reclaiming ownership of your inner world. The Stoics saw this with brutal clarity. Wrote, "I do my duty, other things trouble me not." Read that again. He wasn't saying other things don't exist. He was saying they don't get to decide who he is. And this is where everything shifts for you. The moment you stop asking for permission to be at peace, you stop leaking power. You stop bending your behavior to be liked, accepted, or affirmed. You stand where you are, whole, and let the world react to that instead. Chasing approval is exhausting because it never ends. The mind keeps moving the finish line. You get a nod, then want applause. You get applause, then want admiration. You get admiration, then want certainty that it will never leave. The Stoics recognized this trap and stepped out of it completely. Epictetus said it plainly. If you want to be invincible, make no treaty with things outside your control. Approval lives outside your control. Opinions fluctuate. Praise fades. Disapproval arrives without warning. When you tether your worth to any of it, you hand your stability to strangers. When you refuse, something quiet but profound happens. You become harder to disturb. Here's the paradox you need to feel in your bones. The less you seek validation, the more grounded you become, and the more grounded you are, the less you need anything from anyone. This is not arrogance, it's self-sufficiency. The Stoic didn't reject connection, he rejected dependence. There is a difference. One is openness, the other is hunger, and hunger shows, people sense it. Situations exploit it. Your own mind punishes you for it. Refusing to chase approval is you deciding that your inner posture matters more than external applause. To live this way, you must retrain how you respond to silence, indifference, or misunderstanding. The instinct is to fill the gap, to explain, to clarify, to justify. Stoicism teaches restraint instead. Seneca warned, "He who is brave is free." Bravery here is emotional. It's the courage to let things be unresolved, to let others hold their opinions without rushing to reshape them, to let your actions speak without narrating them. This feels uncomfortable at first because the ego craves confirmation. But every time you resist that urge, you strengthen something deeper than ego, self-respect. You start practicing this by observing how often you seek signals of approval internally, not externally, internally. Notice the moment you do something and immediately look outward for reassurance. Catch the reflex without judging it, then interrupt it. Say to yourself, "I approve of this action because it aligns with my values." That sentence alone, repeated consistently, rewires your center of gravity. Approval moves inward. Stability follows. Another exercise, voluntary invisibility. Not isolation, restraint. Choose moments where you deliberately do not announce your efforts, thoughts, or intentions. Let your mind sit with the discomfort of not being seen. Breathe through it. Watch how the urge rises, peaks, and fades. This is training. You are teaching yourself that silence does not equal insignificance. It equals independence. As you continue, something subtle changes in your energy. You become less reactive to praise and less wounded by criticism. Both lose their grip because neither defines you anymore. You stop oscillating, you become steady. And steadiness is magnetic, not because you're trying to attract anything, but because you are no longer chasing. The Stoics understood that those who do not beg for validation are the hardest to ignore. They move with intention. They speak with restraint. They listen without needing to impress. Do not confuse this with emotional coldness. Stoicism is not numbness. It is clarity. You still feel. You simply don't outsource your worth to feelings triggered by others. You don't let approval inflate you or rejection collapse you. You remain centered. That center becomes your refuge. Here is a daily practice to lock this in. Every evening, reflect on one moment where you resisted the urge to seek approval. Write it down mentally. Acknowledge it. Then ask yourself, did my peace increase or decrease when I chose self-approval? The answer will be consistent. Over time, your nervous system learns the lesson faster than your intellect ever could. Remember this, doing nothing does not mean being passive. It means refusing to scramble for external permission to be at ease. It means standing still while the world spins and realizing you don't have to spin with it. When you stop chasing validation, you don't lose anything real. You lose noise. And in that silence, you gain everything that matters: clarity, dignity, and an unshakable sense that you are enough without asking anyone to confirm it. Start today. Withdraw your need for applause. Return your attention to your principles. Let approval come or not come. Either way, you remain whole. Number 6, staying still while others overreact. Staying still while others overreact is not passivity, it is mastery. The Stoics understood that the person who can pause while the world lunges forward already holds a rare advantage. Wrote, "You can always choose not to be harmed, and you haven't been harmed." That sentence isn't poetic comfort, it's a practical instruction. When you remain still, you deny chaos the reaction it feeds on. You stop turning sparks into fires. And in that stillness, something unexpected happens. Outcomes begin to tilt in your favor without you pushing them. You felt the pressure to react instantly, to respond, to correct, to defend, to prove. That pressure is not urgency, it's conditioning. Most people move because they're uncomfortable being still. Stillness exposes insecurity. It removes the noise that hides fear, so they overreact. They talk too much. They rush decisions. They escalate. When you don't join that movement, you step out of the current. You create a gap. And in that gap, you see clearly while others blur. The Stoic move is simple but not easy. Slow your inner tempo when everything around you speeds up. Seneca warned, "No one is more unhappy than the man who never faces adversity, for he is not permitted to prove himself." Overreaction is an attempt to escape adversity rather than face it. Stillness is the opposite. It's you standing with discomfort long enough to understand it. You do numb it. You don't dramatize it. You observe it. And observation dissolves panic. When you stay still, you stop borrowing other people's emotions. You stop letting urgency infect your nervous system. You become selective about what deserves energy. This selectivity is power. It's not coldness, it's conservation. You're choosing where your attention goes, and attention is the currency everything runs on. Once you stop spending it impulsively, you suddenly have more of it, more clarity, more leverage, more patience than the moment expects you to have. Here's the paradox. Doing nothing is often the most active choice you can make. Not because nothing happens, but because everything else reveals itself. Overreaction clouds truth. Stillness exposes it. Epictetus said, "If someone succeeds in provoking you, realize that your mind is complicit in the provocation." Read that again. Provocation only works if you participate. When you don't, the situation loses its teeth. The pressure collapses inward. What looked urgent begins to look optional. This is where you build the habit. You train yourself to pause at the first emotional spike, not forever, just long enough to breathe once more than feels natural. That extra breath is the hinge. It's the moment where reaction turns into choice. Practice numbing the sensation without obeying it, not the story. The sensation, tightness, heat, restlessness. Let it pass like weather. This trains your nervous system to trust stillness instead of fleeing from it. Another exercise, shorten your internal commentary. When something triggers you, reduce your inner dialogue to one sentence. I can wait. That's it. No analysis, no judgment, just permission to delay. Delay is not avoidance, it's strategy. Over time, you'll notice that many problems dissolve without your intervention, not because you're lucky, but because they were never as solid as they felt in the first place. Staying still also sharpens your timing. When you don't rush, your actions land with precision. You speak when it matters. You move when it counts. Everything else becomes background noise. This is why calm people seem to arrive late and still take the lead. They weren't late. They were waiting for clarity, and clarity always arrives after the noise settles. You may worry that stillness makes you invisible. It doesn't, it makes you unreadable. And unreadable people are respected because they can't be manipulated easily. When others overreact, they expose their buttons. You don't. You remain centered. That contrast is unmistakable. It shifts the balance without confrontation, without explanation, without force. Build this daily. Set moments where you intentionally do nothing when the urge to act appears. Sit with the urge. Let it peak and fall. This is not suppression, it's training. You're teaching yourself that you don't need to discharge every emotion immediately. That patience is not loss, it's accumulation. And once you accumulate enough calm, situations begin to bend around it. Remember what reminded himself during chaos. The best revenge is to be unlike him who performed the injustice. Staying still while others overreact is exactly that. You refuse to mirror disorder. You choose alignment over impulse. And slowly, quietly, you start getting what frantic effort never delivered: respect, clarity, and outcomes that arrive without you chasing them. Start today, do less, pause longer. Let stillness work while others exhaust themselves. Number 7. Preserving energy for decisive moments. Preserving energy for decisive moments begins with a reversal of how you've been taught to live. You were told that effort equals progress, that motion equals meaning, that constant output is a virtue. The Stoics quietly rejected that madness. They understood that energy is a finite resource, and wasting it on trivial reactions, endless opinions, and unnecessary struggles leaves you empty when the moment actually matters. Wrote, you don't have to turn this into something. It doesn't have to upset you. Read that again. Most of your exhaustion doesn't come from action. It comes from unnecessary engagement, from saying yes too often, from thinking too much about what deserves very little of you. When you learn the art of doing nothing, you stop bleeding strength. You stop reacting to every stimulus as if it demands a response. You stop spending emotional currency on things that offer no return. This isn't laziness, it's conservation. It's choosing stillness so that when action is required, it's clean, deliberate, and unstoppable. The Stoics believe that power appears not in constant effort, but in timed effort. A sword swung all day grows dull. A sword drawn once at the right moment ends the fight. Epictetus put it plainly: if you wish to improve, be content to appear clueless or stupid in extraneous matters. That line is uncomfortable because it cuts directly against ego. Your ego wants to comment, react, correct, participate. Your discipline knows better. Every time you resist the urge to engage, you are training yourself to tolerate silence, ambiguity, and restraint. And restraint is not emptiness, it is stored force. You are not disengaging from life. You are choosing where your life force goes. Most people are tired not because they do too much, but because they do too much that doesn't matter. They argue internally. They rehearse imaginary outcomes. They replay moments that are already dead. You don't need to fight that habit with aggression. You dismantle it with awareness. Ask yourself repeatedly, is this worth my energy? Not morally, not emotionally, energetically. If the answer is no, step back. Let it pass. That simple act, done consistently, changes how you move through the world. Seneca warned, it is not that we have a short time to live, but that we waste much of it. Energy works the same way as time. You don't lack it, you hemorrhage it. When you preserve it, you begin to feel a quiet surplus, a calm readiness. You are no longer frantic. You are no longer chasing resolution. You become selective, and selectivity is the foundation of effectiveness. Here is a practice you must adopt if you want this principle to become real: intentional non-response. Every day, choose moments where you deliberately do nothing. No reaction, no internal commentary, no emotional follow-up. Just observe the impulse rise and fall. This trains your nervous system to understand that urgency is optional. Over time, your baseline state becomes calmer, and your energy stops being hijacked by every passing thought. Another exercise: energy budgeting. At the start of your day, decide where your energy is allowed to go. Not tasks, states. Calm, focus, precision. Refuse to donate energy to anxiety, impatience, or ego. When those states appear, don't fight them. Starve them. Attention is fuel. Withdraw it. This is Stoic minimalism applied internally. The paradox is this: when you stop forcing outcomes, outcomes come to you with less resistance. When you stop chasing control, you gain influence. When you stop proving, you start embodying. Reminded himself, the best revenge is not to be like your enemy. Translated energetically, this means you don't match chaos with chaos. You don't match urgency with urgency. You remain still while others burn themselves out. Decisive moments don't announce themselves loudly. They arrive quietly, often when others are depleted. And when they arrive, you will feel it instantly because you are not drained. You are not scattered. You are not second-guessing. Your action is simple, direct, final. That is the reward of restraint. Start practicing today. Do less mentally. React slower emotionally. Engage only where your presence actually changes something. Let everything else pass without commentary. You are not here to exhaust yourself proving you are alive. You are here to move when it matters, and to move with force because you preserved yourself when it didn't. That is the art of doing nothing and still getting everything. Number 8, observing more than you reveal. Observing more than you reveal is one of the most misunderstood forms of power, and the Stoics treated it almost like a quiet art form. Epictetus put it plainly when he said, "Nature has given us one tongue and 2 ears, so we may hear twice as much as we speak." That isn't a suggestion about politeness. It's a strategy for living. When you speak less, you leak less. When you reveal less, you preserve leverage. And when you observe deeply, you begin to see how much of the world runs on impulse, insecurity, and noise. You don't need to fight that chaos. You just need to not join it. Most people rush to express. They narrate their thoughts, announce their intentions, justify their emotions. They believe visibility equals value. But the Stoic path teaches you something sharper. Clarity comes from restraint. When you hold back, you gain space. Space to think. Space to choose. Space to notice patterns others miss because they're too busy projecting themselves into every moment. Observation isn't passive. It's active awareness without unnecessary exposure. When you stop revealing everything, you stop giving the world a script for how to handle you. You become less predictable, and unpredictability, when grounded in calm, is powerful. Seneca warned, "He who talks much errs much." Not because speech is bad, but because unfiltered expression weakens precision. Every word you don't say keeps your inner position intact. Every thought you don't broadcast stays flexible, adjustable, alive. You're no longer committed to reactions you spoke too soon. Here's the shift you must make. Stop treating silence as emptiness. Silence is information gathering mode. While others are revealing their fears, desires, and assumptions, you're watching. You're learning emotional rhythms. You're noticing where tension rises, where ego flares, where insecurity hides. None of this requires confrontation. None of it requires explanation. It requires patience. And patience, practiced daily, turns into quiet authority. You don't need to announce that you're observing. You don't need to look mysterious. You simply need to pause before responding. Let moments breathe. Let people fill the space themselves. When you do speak, your words land heavier, not because they're clever, but because they're considered. This is how doing nothing starts producing results. You're not pushing outcomes. You're letting them reveal themselves. Reminded himself, the best revenge is not to be like your enemy. Translate that inward. The best way to stay ahead is not to mirror the world's urgency. When you refuse to overshare, refuse to rush, refuse to react on cue, you maintain sovereignty over your inner state. That sovereignty is what people feel before they understand it. It's why restraint commands attention without asking for it. Now this takes practice because your mind will resist. It will whisper that you're missing opportunities, that you should clarify, explain, assert. Don't obey immediately. Instead, adopt this daily exercise, the delayed response rule. For one full day, add a pause before every response, even internal ones. Let thoughts rise, let them fall, don't grab them. Notice how many impulses evaporate when not fed. This trains discernment. You begin to see which reactions matter, and which are just noise demanding attention. Another practice, intentional opacity. Decide in advance that you will not reveal your plans, emotions, or conclusions until they are fully formed, or not at all. This isn't secrecy born of fear, it's conservation. You are conserving energy, clarity, and optionality. When you stop narrating your inner life, your mind becomes quieter. And in that quiet, insight sharpens. Observing more than you reveal also protects you from premature identity. The moment you declare who you are, you start defending that declaration. But when you stay undefined, flexible, watching, you can adapt without friction. This is deeply Stoic. It aligns with the idea that your worth is not tied to constant self-expression, but to internal coherence. You don't need applause to move forward. You don't need validation to remain steady. There's a subtle confidence that grows here. You stop needing to be understood immediately. You stop correcting every misinterpretation. You let time do the explaining. That confidence is felt. And paradoxically, the less you explain yourself, the more curious people become. Not because you're trying to intrigue, but because stillness invites projection. Again, you did nothing, and yet something shifted. End each day with a simple reflection exercise inspired by Stoic journaling. Ask yourself, where did I speak when silence would have served me better? Where did I observe instead of react? Don't judge the answers, just record them. Awareness compounds. Within weeks, you'll notice a calmer internal pace, sharper perception, and fewer unnecessary entanglements. This is the art. You don't rush forward. You don't pull attention toward you. You let the world show its hand while you keep yours close. And in doing so, you discover a strange truth the Stoics lived by. When you stop trying to control everything outwardly, everything inwardly begins to align. From that alignment, results follow naturally. Practice restraint. Practice silence. Practice watching without revealing. You'll find that by doing less, you begin receiving more clarity, influence, and a sense of quiet mastery that no force could ever produce. Number 9, trusting timing over force. Trusting timing over force is one of the hardest disciplines you'll ever practice, precisely because it asks you to loosen your grip while the world screams that you should tighten it. The Stoics understood this tension well. Wrote, "Nature does nothing uselessly. Let that land. Nothing rushed, nothing strained, nothing premature, and yet everything arrives." When you absorb this idea deeply, you begin to realize that much of your exhaustion comes not from effort itself, but from effort applied too early, too desperately, or against the grain of reality. You've been taught that progress requires pressure, that if you don't push, nothing moves. But Stoic wisdom invites you to see a different kind of power, the power of alignment. When you stop forcing outcomes, you gain clarity. When you stop rushing, you gain leverage. When you stop gripping every moment with urgency, timing starts to work with you instead of against you. This is not passivity, it's discernment. It's knowing when action compounds and when it contaminates. Epictetus captured this perfectly when he said, "Make the best use of what is in your power and take the rest as it happens." Notice the order. First, what is in your power? Second, release the rest. Most people invert this. They obsess over what they cannot control and neglect what they can. Trusting timing means you stop fighting that inversion. You act where action is clean, and you wait where waiting is wise. You begin to sense when the moment is ripe instead of trying to rip it open. There is a quiet confidence that comes from not chasing, from not needing immediate confirmation, from not demanding that life respond on your schedule. This confidence changes how you show up. You stop broadcasting hunger. You stop leaking impatience. You move from scarcity into sufficiency. And strangely, the more you respect timing, the more doors seem to open without struggle. Not because you manipulated anything, but because you weren't blocking the flow with anxiety and overreach. Here, where the practice becomes real, start paying attention to how urgency feels in your body, that tightness, that restlessness, that mental noise insisting something must happen now. The Stoic move is to pause and question it. Is this urgency rooted in necessity or fear? Is action required or reassurance? Most of the time, you'll discover it's the latter. And once you see that, you can choose differently. You can choose patience as an act of strength. Seneca warned, "Hurry is a symptom of a mind in turmoil." Read that again. Hurry doesn't mean you're driven. It means you're unsettled. Trusting timing is how you settle the mind. You give events space to unfold. You allow information to surface. You let situations reveal their natural direction before inserting yourself. This doesn't delay success, it refines it. It prevents you from burning energy on paths that were never meant to carry you far. To build this habit, you need deliberate restraint. One practical exercise is intentional delay. When you feel the impulse to act immediately, give yourself a small window of non-action. Not to overthink, but to breathe, observe, and ground yourself. During that window, ask, what happens if I do nothing right now? Often, clarity emerges without effort, and even when it doesn't, your response becomes calmer, cleaner, and more effective. Another exercise is daily reflection on timing. At the end of the day, review moments where you rushed internally, even if you didn't act. Notice how that urgency felt. Then imagine responding from patience instead. This mental rehearsal trains you to associate calm with control. Over time, your nervous system learns that waiting is safe, powerful, even. Trusting timing also means accepting that not everything is ready when you want it to be. And that's not a failure, it's reality protecting you. The Stoics didn't see delay as denial. They saw it as preparation. When you internalize this, frustration softens. You stop interpreting pauses as rejection. You start seeing them as alignment checks. And this shift alone can save you years of unnecessary struggle. Reminded himself, what stands in the way becomes the way. Timing is often disguised as obstruction. A pause, a slowdown, a moment where nothing moves. But if you stop resisting it, that pause becomes instructive. It teaches you patience. It sharpens your judgment. It strengthens your emotional spine. And when movement resumes, you're no longer frantic, you're ready. Doing nothing in the Stoic sense is never empty. It's full of awareness, full of restraint, full of trust. You're not abandoning action, you're curating it. You're choosing when to move so that when you do, the movement matters. This is how you get more by doing less. Not through laziness, but through wisdom. So start today. Practice waiting without anxiety. Practice acting without urgency. Practice trusting that life unfolds in sequences you don't need to micromanage. Let go of force. Lean into timing. And watch how much begins to align the moment you stop trying to bend everything to your will. Number 10. Winning by not needing to win. Winning by not needing to win sounds like a contradiction until you feel it working inside you. The Stoics knew this paradox well. How much more grievous are the consequences of anger than the causes of it, reminded himself. Look closely at what he's saying. The cost of insisting on victory, emotionally, mentally, spiritually, is almost always higher than whatever you think you're gaining. When you stop needing to win, you don't become passive. You become untouchable, because nothing owns you anymore. No outcome, no reaction, no approval, and that is where real leverage begins. Most people are trapped in invisible battles. They argue in their heads, rehearse imaginary victories, chase closure, chase validation, chase being right. And the more they chase, the more they leak power. You felt this. The tension, the tightness, the restless urge to resolve, to dominate, to finish something. Stoicism invites you to step back and see the trap clearly. The moment you don't need to win, you regain freedom of movement. You stop being pulled by emotional gravity. You can stay, leave, speak, or remain silent without inner resistance. That flexibility is strength. Epictetus said it plainly. If you want to be invincible, make no treaty with things outside your control. Winning, as most people define it, depends heavily on what others think, feel, or concede. That's why it exhausts you. The Stoic definition of winning is different. It's internal alignment. It's self-command. It's knowing that nothing external can grant or remove your worth. When you truly absorb that, you stop forcing outcomes. And strangely, outcomes begin to favor you. Not because you manipulate them, but because you're no longer desperate for them. This is where doing nothing becomes misunderstood. Doing nothing is not laziness, it is restraint. It is choosing not to act from compulsion. Not every impulse deserves execution. Not every provocation deserves response. Not every tension deserves resolution. When you pause instead of pushing, you give clarity time to surface. You allow situations to reveal themselves without interference. And in that space, your advantage quietly grows. There's a deep calm that arrives when you no longer measure yourself by victories. You stop keeping score. You stop tallying losses. You stop framing life as a contest. That mental shift alone dissolves enormous friction. Seneca warned, "He who is brave is free." Bravery here isn't aggression. It's the courage to not chase reassurance, to not force conclusions, to not grasp for the final word. When you don't need to win, you stop negotiating with your ego. And that's when peace starts to feel solid instead of fragile. Now, this doesn't happen automatically. You must train it. Start with a simple habit. Notice the urge to win, not suppress it, just notice it. Feel how it tightens your chest, speeds your thoughts, sharpens your inner tone. That urge is not wisdom, it's conditioning. The Stoics believed awareness weakens impulses. Once you see the urge clearly, you can choose not to obey it. That single pause changes everything. Another practice, deliberate non-closure. Allow some thoughts, tensions, and questions to remain unresolved. Your mind will protest. It craves certainty. But certainty is often a disguise for control. By tolerating, you strengthen emotional endurance. You teach yourself that nothing collapses if you do win the moment. This builds an inner spaciousness that most people never experience. As you stop needing to win, something subtle happens. Your words slow down, your reactions soften, your presence deepens. You stop pushing energy outward and start consolidating it inward. This is why people who don't chase outcomes often seem grounded, centered, hard to rattle. They are not distracted by proving anything. Their focus is intact, and focus, when undiluted, is magnetic. Remember, the Stoic path isn't about indifference, it's about selectivity. You choose where your effort goes, you conserve your energy, you invest it only where it aligns with your principles. Urged himself, ask yourself at every moment, is this necessary? When winning isn't necessary, you release it. And what replaces it is clarity, calm, a quiet confidence that doesn't need applause. Here's a powerful daily exercise, voluntary surrender. Each day, consciously let go of one urge to assert, correct, or finalize. Do nothing. Observe the discomfort. Let it pass without action. This is not avoidance, it's mastery. Over time, you'll notice something profound. Your sense of self becomes less reactive, more anchored. You no longer rise and fall with every internal tide. Another exercise, self-auditing your motives. Before acting, ask, am I doing this to maintain inner alignment or to secure an external win? If it's the latter, pause, not forever, just long enough to reclaim choice. That pause is where freedom lives. Winning by not needing to win is ultimately about trust. Trust in yourself, trust in time, trust that composure outlasts force. You stop rushing the universe. You stop wrestling reality. And in that surrender, you paradoxically gain more control, not over outcomes, but over yourself. And that is the only victory that compounds. So adopt this mindset deliberately. Release the need to dominate moments. Let stillness do the work. Let restraint sharpen your edge. When you no longer need to win, you stop bleeding energy into needless battles. You become lighter, clearer, stronger. And without chasing anything at all, you begin to get everything that actually matters. Before you leave, remember this. The Stoics never taught passivity, they taught precision. Reminded himself that peace comes not from controlling the world, but from mastering his response to it. And that's the quiet power you're stepping into now. When you stop chasing, you stop leaking energy. When you stop forcing outcomes, clarity replaces chaos. Doing nothing isn't weakness, it's restraint. It's choosing alignment over anxiety, purpose over panic, and self-command over noise. Most people spend their lives exhausting themselves trying to be seen. You're learning how to become undeniable by standing still, grounded, and unmoved. If this message resonated, don't let it fade into inspiration alone. Practice it. Pause before you react. Withhold effort where force isn't required. Let life come to you on your terms. That's how leverage is built. That's how respect grows. That's how everything you once chased begins to orbit you instead. If you found value here, like the video, subscribe for more Stoic wisdom applied to modern life, and share this with someone who's still trying too hard. Walk calmly, act deliberately, and remember, the moment you stop grasping is often the moment everything finally arrives.